Alright, so probably don't are in the habit of this yet, but remember, take notes, write things down. If you have questions, write them down at the time. That way, hopefully, they're easy to remember tomorrow. So today we're going to talk about order of operations. And also, if I talk too fast, let me know, because I know I do it, and I apologize. Um, excuse me. Order of operations. Hopefully you already know this, but there's a saying, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. If you had Mrs. Raleigh, she'd like to say, please excuse my dear Aunt Susan, which for some students that actually works as a saying, because, some of you probably are related to Mrs. Raleigh. Anyways, Pemdas stands for parentheses, or parenthesis, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, subtraction. Something that I do not do a very good job of, and I'm going to do better right now. I want you to make some kind of mark next to multiplication and division. Either on your own paper, or if you're doing it online, that's fine. And notes next to addition and subtraction. Preferably in two different colors. Because it does not matter if you multiply or divide first. And it does not matter if you add or subtract. It just matters that you do them in that order. Meaning, you do parentheses, then you do exponents, then you can either divide or multiply, whichever one you want to do, whichever one is actually easier is what I recommend. And then after you do those two things, then when you're down to just addition or subtraction, you can do either subtraction or addition, whichever one makes more sense to you at the time. You have to evaluate them in that order, though, meaning first thing once again you look at is parentheses. Then you look at exponents. Then you look at the red highlighter I have there, multiplication or division. Then after you're done with all of those, and once again you do all your parentheses, all your exponents, all your multiplication and division, then you do all your addition and subtraction, which should get you to the end of your problem. If not, you skipped a step and you should need to start back over. So first off, we're going to make sure you know how to do powers. So 3 to the third is the same as 3 times 3 times 3. So if you can do that in your head, great, because obviously I hope you can do 3 times 3 in your head, which you should know is 9. And then 9 times 3 is 27. But if you need to write it out, here's how I write it out. I would do 3 times 3, and I would do it in different colors so it's easier to see. 3 times 3 is 9. Take that times 3, I get 27. That's how I like to do it, so that you can see the chain. So I get through 2, then I get my third one, and I get my answer. Same thing with 2 to the 5th. Honestly, 2 should be easier to do in your head, but in case you can't, I do not judge. 2 times 2 is 4. Times that by 2 is 8. Times that by 2 is 16. Times that by 2, you get a final answer of 32. Okay? If you want other shortcuts or know of a different shortcut, feel free to share it in class. It would be, you guys, it would not be the first time that somebody's come to me and be like, oh, I always did it this way, and I look at them and say, oh my goodness, that is the smartest thing I've ever seen. So it very well could be that you know an easier way to do some of these things. Feel free to share them, because there are many different ways to do them, and not to mention I probably don't know every single way. I know a lot of ways to do things. But if I don't know every single way, it very well could be that you could tell me something that might help your classmates out. So, alright. So let's do PEMDAS. First thing you always look at is the P, which stands for parenthesis. So we do what's inside the parenthesis first. Now technically inside the parenthesis, you should still go in order. You need to do exponents, then you need to multiply, then you need to divide, then you need to add, then you need to subtract. This one, there's only one thing going on in there. We just subtract, right? So I do that. Everything else stays the same. Now some of you are like, why can't I do the other things? There are some other steps you can take at the same time, but it's smarter if you're a newbie or you don't. I don't want to call you a newbie. I'm sorry. If you're not as well practiced, it's best to go one step at a time. So I'm not going to skip steps and show you other things you can be doing at the same time until we're a little farther along. Okay. Then, are there any exponents? No. So now we can multiply or divide. And some people, and technically I left the parentheses on there, so probably the first thing I would do is multiply those two together. But multiplication is the next thing you're going to do anyways. And then after multiplication comes division. So 4 divided by 2 would make 2. And then you add or subtract. Luckily, there's only one or the other. So I have 22 as my answer. Something to note, be a very good note for you to have. When you have quotients like this or division like this, you really need to think of the top as in its own parenthesis and the bottom as if it's in its own parenthesis. So you need to simplify both of them before you start solving or doing the division. Even though it doesn't necessarily look like that, that's how they need to be treated. So what is inside that top parenthesis that you do first? Well, you're inside the parenthesis, so you look for another parenthesis. Is there another parenthesis in there? No. So then I look for an exponent. There is an exponent, so I'm going to get 8, because 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 a third time is 8. And then, honestly, you could do the bottom right now, but I'm just not going to worry about it. We'll just do it all together. So inside that top parenthesis, you do 8 minus 5. I get 3, right? And then I'm going to go to my second parenthesis, which once again I could have been doing this at the same time. Too bad that I didn't. There's only one thing going on in there. I just add them together. So I get 24. Notice, since there's nothing outside of the two parentheses I drew up here, that I don't have to leave my parentheses at either of these two spots when I'm done. Okay, so now after knowing my parentheses, I look for exponents still that might have happened on the outside. There's nothing. Multiplying, no, but there is division. Now, some of you might look at this and say, oh, well, 24 doesn't go into 3, but you have to remember you can simplify. And since both pieces are divisible by 3, think of it like this. 3 divided by 3 on top will be 1. 24 divided by 3 is 8. Now you're done. If you have questions over that or you need to see it a different way, come ask me and we can talk about it. But since I'm not right there next to you, I don't actually know what may or may not be confusing. So write down any questions you have if you have any. Otherwise, if you got it, cool. We'll just keep going. Alright, so this next one. Still doing PEMDAS. You look for parentheses. Brackets. You see the brackets up here? Those count as parentheses. Something else you need to note that I'll tell you now. You may not have much practice with absolute values, but absolute values count as brackets or parentheses also. You can think of parentheses not necessarily as these curved lines. Think of it more as areas that are contained. So like both of those are contained on the inside. So we look for parentheses. The brackets would be my first parentheses. And then inside of that, I have to look for parentheses again. So I do have a parenthesis inside of a parenthesis. So the first thing I'm going to work on is the 3 minus 2. And there's no multiplication or more parentheses in there. So all I'm going to do is that subtraction. So I have the 15 minus, go ahead and leave that, plus 3 minus 2 is 1, right? And I left the parentheses on in there because the next thing I have to do is my exponent. But my exponent is 1. What is 1 times 1? 1. So, and I'm going to mark it like this so we can see that I did that next. So I get 1. And then I have to do my parentheses still, right? So then I have 10 plus 1, which is 11. And so I'm sitting here. Now something to note. The reason it's important to note that you can do addition or subtraction first is because I have a lot of kids who do this. Is they will go, oh, I can take the 11 plus the 6 and that makes 17. 15 minus 17 makes an answer. But that is not an 11. You have to think of that like it's a negative 11. So that's why it's more easier to subtract first. So what is 15 minus 11? 4. Then I can add 6 to that. It makes me a nice answer of 10. So if that didn't make sense, what I just said a second ago, we can talk about it. But it's easier for me to explain that one in class than it is to explain it online. Okay? So I'm going to go on. Evaluating algebraic expressions. Once again, just to re-emphasize this, an expression is something that doesn't have an equal sign in it. But all I want you to do on these situations is take these numbers, whatever they are, and plug them in. So I'm going to take the 4, and let me do it better than that. I'm going to take the 4, and it's going to go for the x. I'm going to take the 5, it's going to go for the y. And the 3 is going to go in for the z. Meaning my equation is going to look like 3, and it's best to put parentheses when you plug numbers in. That way you don't forget what was happening first. Oops. And that way when you write them, you don't think, oh, it's 34 now, or in that case, 24 now. But I've also had many a person who thought, oh, so let's take 3 times 4, make 12, and then square 12. But that's not what the order of operations says. The order of operations says the next thing you need to do on those would be the power. But let's deal with the inside the parentheses first. So the first thing I look at is my exponents, right? So 3 to the third, well, we already actually did this one. 3 times 3 is 9. Times a third 3 would be 27. Once again, you can write it out. 9, 27. So I end up with 3 times 4 squared plus 2 times 4. And I need to move this over because I did not give myself enough room at all. Plus 27. Oops. And then we're still working inside the parentheses. Next thing you do would be the multiplication that's in there, right? Because there is no exponents anymore. So 2 times 4 is 8. Then I still have to work inside that parenthesis. So I'm going to get 3 times 4 squared plus 35. And once again, if you know how to do this without going through step by step, I'm not going to count you wrong. It is important that I can see what you're doing on your homework and things. But if you're following the right mental process, I will know that you actually know how to do it. Okay? So in other words, you don't have to write out everything I write. If you can get, like I'm writing out, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm on step 5 and I still have 2 more to go. So I'm going to be at 7 steps. Some of you may be able to get there in 3. That's fine. I'm not going to count you wrong. Next thing I would do is the squared, right? Because exponent comes next. And I can leave the parenthesis there if that makes it easier. And then I have to multiply again. 3 times 16 is 48. And then 48 plus 35 is 70, 83. Okay. I know there was a lot of me just talking there, but hopefully you understood. If you have any questions, once again, write them down. We'll talk about them tomorrow. Okay. I should still be pretty decent on time, so let's go ahead and do the word problem, and then we will call it good because that's the last thing on here. So, word problem and we're done. So, each side of the Great Pyramid of Giza, Egypt, is a triangle. The base of each triangle once measured 230 meters. Something I always recommend when they do word problems. Draw a picture. 230 meters. The height of each triangle, when they talk about height, they're actually talking about this height. Once measured 187. Is that what that says? I wrote over the top of it. Yeah, 187. Once again, meters. And since we know the area of a triangle is 1/2 and product of the base and the height, so if I take base and height and take 1/2 of it, or just think of it this way, 1/2 times it, that would get me my area. Well, it wants an expression, I'm done. Then it wants me to actually find the area, well, then I just plug in my numbers. So I have 1/2 times 230 times 187. Well, Some of you probably can figure out that half of 230, well, that'd be 1, and half of 30 is 15. So 115 times 187, that's what that would make. And that, I will admit, I used a calculator, but that's okay. Meters. And hopefully you know that area should be squared. The easy way to know it's squared is because I took a meter times a meter. So there's 2 meters, so I end up with 2 meters right there. Okay? That is all on this one. Once again, any questions, write them down. Go back, rewatch. And we will deal with them tomorrow. Have a good evening.